Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How you doing?
Very well, Brian. There's a little spring is springing here in California.
Oh, hush.
Almond trees are blooming. The plum trees are blooming. A
Oh,
little bit of wildflowers
hush.
are out. I know, I'm sorry.
Okay, full disclosure, I was in Sacramento last week, and
Yes, you
it was wonderful. T-shirt, regular pants. It was so nice. Getting off the airplane. Okay. Yes, the captain did say 25 degrees. I don't think it set in my head what that really was going to feel like, though. I raced through waiting for my wife to come pick me up, and I'm looking out the door and I'm like, okay, I think that's her. And I go to step outside. Oh my gosh.
Oh.
Anybody who's seen Cool Runnings where the guy walks out in the middle of Canada and then runs back in and puts all of his clothes on to exit the airport, that's how I felt. I immediately wanted to go back in. Said, why am I here? Why did I leave California to come back to 25 degrees? I think like 10 degrees with the wind chill. Not fun. Not fun at all. Snow everywhere on the ground. Oh, still. And this is Washington, D.C., where we don't know what to do with that stuff. So, yeah. I'm feeling a little envious right now of your weather there.
Oh, well.
Oh, well, exactly. We made our choices, obviously. We're very excited today. For those of you watching on video, you're probably wondering, who's the person on the screen with you? We have a very special guest, and I'm going to let Nora do the introduction in just a second, but do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. We really appreciate it. Comment, share, all of those things. It really helps us out. It helps spread the word and gets us out there to more people. You can always reach out to us at movingconvos@gmail.com or check us out on Instagram. Moving Convos is our handle, and we post our things there. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Nora to make the introduction.
So any of you who are watching on video and any of you have any background whatsoever in the Pilates and movement industry know this wonderful woman who is sitting on top of us right now, Madeline Black. We're so excited to have her as a guest today. She's coming to us from Baja, California, which, speaking of beautiful weather, is beautiful weather.
Oh my gosh.
And we were just super excited to have Madeline because her background is just wide. There's so many ways that we could go with talking to her. And we kind of decided we wanted to focus a little bit on gait and thoracolumbar fascia and how all that goes together. And then, anything about how she got here. She's written 3 books now. She's had been an educator for years and years and years. She does a lot of advanced work with students and teachers. And anyway, we're just super, super happy to have her. So thank you so much for joining us, Madeline.
Oh, it's so great, an honor to be here. Thanks for inviting me. It's going to be fun. Love talking to you guys.
So tell us, I'm going to have you introduce yourself just a little bit. So if you would just start a little bit of your story, and this can be a moment because you have quite a story in terms of how you've gotten into the movement education industry and the movement education field.
Yeah, you have to go 40 years, right? So,
I know.
it's a span. So it's not like, I went to college and got out and here I am, So, and then looking at, the fitness industry and what Pilates at that time and dance at that time and yoga at that time. And that time being like 1980s, actually, if I really want to be truthful, late 70s. Some of you are probably like, what? Anyway, so I know, I almost said that. So when you look at the history, like fitness, for instance, there was no certification. Actually, it was just ACSM, and ACE, hadn't done a personal training. That didn't even exist. Personal training wasn't even. It just started. You could go into that history. And so in a sense, when you step into an industry that's just developing, you get to ride the wave for 40 years, but I've always been, at first my interest was all about me, so mainly I was still pursuing that professional dance career. I was in a professional company. And then, that ended, and then I was auditioning, and I was still had my, Merce Cunningham goal there to get into that company. And, so you have to train. I mean, it's training hard, it's ballet every day then I was doing, and I'm not a naturally like super strong person, muscle fiber cells and all that, I had to work at it. So I was, for a dancer, it's like, what are you doing lifting weights and you're running and you're, so I got into that whole thing. But at the same time, you have to be the mover, so, I was introduced to Pilates early on. And then I happened to land a job because of my obsession with training, and I needed to make a living in order to go to those auditions, and I ended up at the Eastside Sports Medicine Center, which is, where I met Marika Molnar. So she's a key
in New York,
person
right?
in New York.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and, it was Marika who took me under her wing, at least I say she did. She probably went, you just tag along. But, and it was through her, she's a physical therapist. She's the lead physical therapist for New York City Ballet right now, for those of you who don't know her. And she was very important early in Pilates education because she started contributing, more science and gait. And I learned a lot of my early gait patterning in the 80s from her, and then she was also a person saying, you should go study with Irene Dowd, and you should go study with Jean-Claude West, and you should, do some cranial work. Like she was like, and then she was also like, and don't go to PT school.
So she was a real major mentor for you. But
Huge,
this was also this is a passion you had.
Yeah.
And a passion you had about how do I move better? Right. Regardless of the modality. So you're interested in whatever it took.
Right. It's like an Olympic athlete. Well, they're going to do everything they possibly can to get that gold medal. And that was kind of my mindset, even though I wasn't an Olympic level person, but anyway, but that's how you start pulling in information, and then this, personal training industry started popping, in 88, 89, it was like very, very new. And I happened to be in a center where it actually, I believe it started there. Because I remember reading an article in Dance Magazine about, this movement analysis and someone looking at you and telling you what you need to do. And I thought, this is it. This is what I need, And then, I just got super curious, super interested. And I landed in some amazing teachers' studios. And, and to this day, I'm still, connected with them. And, and in fact, Jean-Claude, I said to him, it was a while ago, I said, you really have, I was just like honoring my main teacher. A lot of my work is reflective of his work. I mean, it's just part of my DNA now, and he said, he goes, you know what? I just got the ball rolling. He goes, you're the one who went crazy. So, because, I went down that whole rabbit hole of integrative manual therapy. I studied 3 years with Tom Hendrickson, orthopedic massage, because I wanted to know about touch more. I wanted to be able to say, I am touching this particular structure, and how is it moved? Where should it be? Because his work was more of it was fascial. And actually the word fascia came into my knowledge through Jean-Claude back in the 80s. Nobody was really talking about fascia.
Wow.
1980s. Yeah, because
he was
already,
he started collaborating with Schultz. What's his first name? The golfer, famous. The Endless Web book. The Endless Web book.
Yes, there we go.
And Louis Schultz.
Yes.
And so the two of them, and Jean-Claude was really, he was doing Rolfing on the Reformer and on the Cadillac. And he was, and they were working together and developing, this way of touching and way of making tissue changing.
So hands-on work with movement.
Yes. Well, that's, when if you get Rolfing, they're
Yeah.
moving you, right? They're
Yes.
moving and moving the tissue. You're always kind of, or they're asking you to move and they're doing something, or they're moving you and doing, so they've always had movement involved in order to really have an effect on the fascia, because fascia is moving everything, and so I was so fascinated by that. So, and I needed to learn more, but I had left New York and ended up in San Francisco because I was still doing the dancer thing. So, I went to San Francisco to work with Margaret Jenkins, who has a dance company in San Francisco. So I see what I mean? I was like, oh, I'll get a job there. I'll do that. I live in San Francisco, And it was there when I met you, Nora, and Elizabeth at St. Francis, because I was working with Mercy Sidbury. Yeah. And, I went over to the center there, primarily work with Mercy. And, that's kind of where that was going. But I wanted more of this work of palpation and touching and knowing structures. And, because I got turned on to that, through Jean-Claude. And that's when I met Tom Hendrickson. Who really came from the Lauren Berry work. That's another kind of body work. He was more like a Rolfer, and he was from Reading. And so in the Bay Area, there's a lot of people who have worked with Lauren Berry.
From him, yeah.
So, but it never really, never really spread. But Tom spent a year or so with him. And so his work started developing, based on structure, but also quality of tissue, the density of the tissue, and then also the wave movement, like to get the tissue to move, you kind of, and then I was learning a lot about my own body in terms of working so that, I would, feel Tom really emphasized how you were transferring your own body weight, as you would move into that person's body, because you're the force, you're putting a force vector into their tissue, so it's coming through you to them, and then it moves through them and then through back to you. And then it becomes this, it's just really fascinating work. And so, so I went down there, but then there's more, because we have, our nervous system. So it's like, okay, we have our responses. Now I can change a response with someone's body, through these, manual things, but then there's, the nervous system, like these are isolated parts, and how do we make it as a whole? How does that, so you have a natural response, a reflex, right? And that reflex is there. So you have to, that's when I was introduced to the work of Sharon Weisselfish Giammatteo, who's she's not alive anymore, but I spent 10 years taking many courses through their school. It was called IMT, Integrative Manual Therapy, kind of one of those generic terms, but I learned so much about unwinding and the fascia, so different kind of, so more visceral work and lymphatic work, and so. Yeah. And then you come back and you're like, wait a second, I need my muscles again. Right.
So Madeline, this is fantastic, because again, I feel like I know little pieces of your story, but it's a very incomplete tapestry. And
well, you've been busy, Nora.
Well, as have you. But all this early work, and Brian's done a lot of manual work as well, in feeling the body, in feeling tissue, in understanding how touch affects movement. I think when I look at the body work you've produced, it comes so much from that movement, fascia, manual, visceral, nervous system. It's like it really does work on bringing all of it together, because it all it isn't separate, right? It all does go together.
Correct. Right. Yeah.
That's I think what you and I, Nora, have talked about so many times is, throughout our career, we're taking courses, we're taking lectures, and we're learning from different people. And you take what works for you in your practice and you try and apply it, and you're building your toolbox. You really are building the biggest toolbox you can, because you don't know what the person in front of you is going to need. And you want to make sure you have something that's going to apply to them. And it sounds like, Madeline, you sought out people to create an even larger toolbox. So you really were going to be able to touch them in ways, no pun intended, touch them, but in ways that they needed in order to get to where they want to be.
Yeah, it's listening to and that's, so when I first was doing Pilates, when I came to San Francisco, actually, I almost got a job at the center, and then the board of the hospital was like, hiring freeze. I don't know if you remember that, Nora, but I remember I was so devastated.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I just almost had a job, but it was a hiring freeze, so I wasn't being hired. So as usual, what do you do? Well, you got to open your own shop, I guess.
I was gonna say, you just do your own thing.
So, I got help from my brother because I couldn't afford anything. I bought my first reformer. I set up in a really bad neighborhood because I couldn't afford the rent. But, it's one of those things, you make it and they come,
Yeah.
So, that's, kind of how it started for me, was just opening up my own little, it was the first independent studio in the Bay Area.
Which is amazing.
Yeah. It was, anyway, so, and then it grew, right? Because people came and, and then I needed people to help me. And then there were dancers coming to me who were like, I really like what you're doing. Can I learn from you? And, many years later, that's, and a body of work. So, I came up with that name because for artists and dancers, you say someone's body of work,
Yes.
So to me, the name meant really a lot to me because it was like my body of work, all of these things, right?
Yeah.
So, and it had the word body in it, it had the verb, so, and Gene Sullivan owns a body of work. We worked together for so many years, and it's still alive in San Francisco. In the Presidio.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
So I have a question for you. How much do you, in your practice, combine manual work with movement? Like, are a lot of your sessions really combining the two of them? Do you do some that are pure movement, some that are more pure body work? Like, what's kind of, how do you do that?
Yeah, good question. So I always work with assessment first. Even clients have been with me for 25 years or whatever. I can do it pretty quick, when they walk in. My eye is like, because I know their body so well, so I'll be like, that looks a little off to me. Can you come here for a second? And then I do like this and, okay, we're going to start here, but generally I start with some kind of like getting them organized, some type of thing. So that can be like a MET type of thing, it's a contract release thing, a positional release thing. I hate that word release. I'm trying to come up with a new word for that. Because we're technically not releasing, we're just changing the tension.
So organizing.
Reorganizing them. Yeah, but there's a change in the tension of the tissue, and sometimes that tension needs to be able to, like with the fascia, you have to actually get it to like move. It has to do that gliding in certain areas, and in other areas it's not to glide. So if it's gliding where it shouldn't be gliding, that's not so good either. So then, then I would introduce more of like isometric contraction and try to change the tissue a little bit. And I get things so that I see that the assessment, they're kind of got the hip glide going, and I could see the lumbar lateral flexion, and, and I'm like, okay, we're better organized. And then I ask them, how do you feel lying on the table? And they're like, God, I feel both sides of my back now on the table. I'm like, let's go. Now it's time. Let's strengthen. Let's load. So it's kind of, and that's how I've designed my book. So it was really designed to teach the teachers, just say, take a look, and sometimes you don't have to do a lot of reorganizing, right? I mean, sometimes you're like, well, let's just go, and that's, and I use the Pilates apparatus, and you might be interested in this, Brian, it's like another set of hands. So I use the bars, and in that way where, are the straps. And so then I'm able to get my hands on someone, and then the bar is doing something. And then I can do a like gliding or shifting while I'm, doing something.
I like that.
So, so anyway, but that's basically what I do. And at the end of the session, that they feel more balanced. And, then I go for the strengthening. That's always my goal, right? I got to load them, got to load the tissue. I got to see how they respond,
I love that.
So,
I like that in our industry, and I've taught many people like this. I'm sure you have, Nora has, that everybody wants to fix everybody.
Mhm.
So they almost get too fixated on the beginning portion, what you're talking about, the integration, getting them to release and all of that stuff, that they never get to the strengthening part, that they sort of stop before they really get to that point. So I love the fact that you say the session will also include that aspect of it, because that's really where you can make a lasting change. It's one thing for you to make the changes on the table, but they got to get up and walk out of here and lift things up and move through their life. So it's that aspect that I love hearing about, that it's not just, okay, let's do this. Let's make sure that the person can perform.
Yeah, that was something really early on that resonated for me from Marika, because she'd say, it's okay to release, if you want to use that word, release people, but you've got to give them something to stand on. Like, you can't just release them and they'll be like mushy. And that's happened to me on the table. I've been on the table with body workers, and they have just, oh, and then literally I can't get off the table. I've had that happen. And then a body worker saying, well, I don't know, just lie there for a while and get it together. See you later. I was like, I can't move. Like, I had to sit there and start doing isometric contractions and pull myself back together again and get off the table. So I've also learned, from doing stuff to myself or other people, right? The work I receive, you learn a lot, through that. So your own practice is, to me, my own personal practice is really important. Yeah.
So next thing I want to talk about a little bit, and we've done a little preview, you guys, just so you know, when you're talking first, was you said, and I know from, Pilates Applications for Health Conditions, the book that you and Elizabeth co-edited and co-wrote together, that you use gait as a lot of your primary assessment tool. And I wanted to bring in just that idea of, like, number one, why do you do that? Which is kind of obvious, but why do you do that? And number two, thinking about that in relationship to the thoracolumbar fascia and how that kind of creates some tension and stuff. So anyway, I just want to bring up that topic and see where that goes.
Yeah, well, that book project, 7 years, by the way.
Wow.
Considerable. It's considerable.
Yeah, it was a long process, because just a little backdrop is both Elizabeth and I have books published by Handspring. And then they came to us and said, we would really like to have a Pilates book that's about research, and all the research on it. And I remember in the meeting, and she looked at, we looked at each other, and we were like, well, I think the book will be about this big, this tiny little book. There's really not a lot of research on there.
But it's not much.
It's not much. And some of it's not good.
Not good quality.
People who are doing it are doing their best. And then it's hard to control. Like, you can't just say in a study, the people did the mat exercises, they did the hundreds and this, you know what I mean? Then you're like, well, how did they do it? Like, there's so many ways to do it. So it's not an accurate way of, it's a very difficult thing to study. So we started thinking, well, what could we do? And we came up with the idea of a case report. So a one-person report, and then we would recruit our community, people that we know, in the Pilates world, who are doing, brilliant work. And we just reached out to tons of people to see who would be interested in this crazy project. And, but she and I developed what the case study was going to be. So, and both Elizabeth and I have huge interest in gait, so it just made sense that we needed to set what the protocol is going to be. And every case report had to follow the same one. Otherwise, it's not right.
Otherwise, it's too confusing.
Yeah. I mean, it can't just be random, workout sessions. I mean, it had to be, everyone did the same assessment, and then and we did a whole format, even the chart and what they had to write. They had to tell us the intention. They had to tell us what the findings were, and they had to, so we structured it. I mean, it was a lot of work just to do that, to structure it. And gait is also a great determiner of your health condition, right?
Yeah.
So today we know through research that you can, doctors now are actually looking at someone's gait, and being able to predict before any medical tests that there is a neurological problem or there's another problem,
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it would just made sense that we use that as the basis, for the book. So,
Nice.
and, there were different approaches, obviously, through
Yeah.
the Pilates equipment and all of that in the book, which is why it turned out so big too. So, but anyway, but with gait, so it's interesting because, with the fascia, there's, different ways people look at it. And I'm closing my eyes a little bit because it's more complicated. You can make it simple by saying, okay, there's the superficial layer and then there's the deep layer, and, but in reality, there are no layers, right? A
Right.
human
It
being
all
is,
interconnects.
it's
from the
all,
bottom on
yeah,
out.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's fluid, it's, but I mean,
Yeah.
yes, if you pull your skin, if you grab your skin, that's your superficial fascia. You're pulling underneath a superficial fascia anywhere. I mean, anywhere where you pull, and there's a lot of movement there, so there should be, and unless you have a scar, then there's no movement there, and then the effect of what's the ripple effect as it gets deeper and deeper and deeper into the body. Where is it, moving or not moving? So, even by doing movement by that, you are moving the deep fascia, you are moving the bones, they're getting it, even though you're not touching it. And the visceral work, when you're intentioning, from the outside, you're placing your hands on the organs, and if you can tune in, you can start to feel the motility. So there's movement, within the organs, but are you touching them directly? No, of course not. My liver's here, like, here it is. Like, but am I really touching my liver? No, I have to go through a lot of stuff to get there, so, but the effect of the pressure of your hand. And then if you are really a person who is aligned with the idea of electromagnetic fields, which of course the energy is there. And I'm not talking about like, energy,
No,
there's that
it's
too. But I mean, it's
measurable.
literally the measurable
It's
piezoelectric
stuff from your hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
It's not actually
you're
woo-woo. It's actually.
yeah, I know. But some people, when they hear that word, they kind of, but, so you have that effect, and you can change the movement of that, and changes your breathing. It changes the pressures, so I don't know. Now I got lost, you guys, in the conversation. Thoracolumbar fascia. But I'm just saying that, for gait, right? So if you look at the picture of thoracolumbar fascia, it's that white stuff, that the glutes are coming into, and then the lats are coming into. That's, so once you take the skin off and once you take the superficial fascia away, which is a lot of your fat and lymph, and there's a lot of blood vessels in there, and nerves. There's a lot of nerves. I participated with Gil Headley on his nerve tour. He spent 6 months or more dissecting one body, and he was able to keep the entire nervous system as a whole. Brain, every nerve, not every single nerve, obviously, but most of them through the whole body. And he actually, if you haven't seen it, you have got to go to his website and see the nerve tour. He's got it on there. It's remarkable what he did. And then he did this beautiful tour. He traveled, I think, for 2 years giving a lecture. But I was privileged. Oh my God, you have no idea how privileged I was to be able to go in and assist him on parts of it. Just fascinating. So to see, anyway, I'm just saying that once you remove all that stuff, and you actually see the deep, the thoracolumbar fascia is deep. It's a part of the deep fascia, but it's like and to me, the fascia is also ligaments and tendons. It's the same. It just has a different name. It's fascial. So think of the thoracolumbar fascia as almost like, you could say, the ligaments of the glutes that go up into the spine, that connect with the lats. Same thing with the lats.
Interesting.
So, so you kind of look at that, as and also iliotibial band. I mean, Gil always referenced it as the long tendon of the glute max. Because it is,
it goes all the way up.
So, it's, and the other thing I want to mention too, which not a lot of people think about, and I've been thinking about it a lot lately. I mean, Nori asked me, like, what's fascinating me now? Well, what's fascinating me now is my neck, because I'm like swimming a lot, and I'm like, oh, my neck, so, the nuchal line, if you look at the fascia of the neck, it's the thoracolumbar fascia of the neck, like in a way, in the back, and the two of them. And then if you look at it, you can just Google it and look at an anatomy picture, the nuchal, which is on the base of the skull, and it's so thick, and I've seen it. So that's the beauty of going to a lab and participating, because you actually, when you see it, you can't unsee it. It's like, and so anyway, so it's through the neck there, and of course it gets narrow, and it through the spine. I mean, if you're dissecting, you can make it narrow, but then it widens out again, at the thoracolumbar fascia. So in gait, you have your thoracic rotation and your arm swing, right? So you're now moving, through the lat glute, in the back, and in the front, you got your pec obliques, I mean, it's a whole system, together. And so with the swing of the arm, you're pulling the tension, and that's what's happening, through the thoracolumbar fascia, because it's a force transducer. So when your foot hits the ground, right? So you heel strike, you hit the ground with your foot, and you're rolling through your foot to take a step, hopefully, unless you have an ankle problem or a hip problem, or your ribs aren't rotating. Maybe your foot's not going to hit very well, so it's like, you got to look at that whole thing. So it's how that movement happens, and it needs to glide. It needs to move. And if you're got back pain, and I have to say, full disclosure here, I've lived most of my life with back pain. So it's like, it comes and goes. I've had a lot of injuries, and that's why I studied so much of it, because I'm like, why is this happening to me? I'm doing all the right things, and I still have this, but it's part of my life. I know how to manage it. I'm having a good week this week. But I know that I can notice that my thoracolumbar fascia and my back starts to really get like glued to the back. I can see it in the mirror. It's like, like I just want to, I've had cupping done where, they put it on your thoracolumbar fascia and like pull it out. Like, it's dehydration too, right? It's dehydration because, I mean, it's not just I'm not drinking enough water. I don't think you can drink enough water. I'm getting old.
It's not that. It's how the tissues
are
using the fluids that are coming into them. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not just water coming in. It's got to be
exactly. So I can see that, and then I go ahead and I do some movements that I create actually more tension, if that makes sense, in order to set up the environment for me to get that fascia to start to glide again. And I can do it, but it's, I have this image. I actually, Nora, you'll appreciate this because I know you've gone to Korea. I was trying to describe the thoracolumbar fascia and this connection through the lats and the glutes to this class. And the fact that, like, when I'm reaching my arms up overhead, when you reach your arms overhead and you create and you take out the slack of your armpit, and you can feel your lats, and you really pull as if you're hanging from a bar almost, right? So you're now, like I always say, it's like taking the wrinkles out of your skin or your clothes, and you create that tension, right? So you're reaching your arms up, and then if you contrast it with your legs, you're pulling the thoracolumbar fascia very top. And I used to try to think of an image, like I sometimes think about a cowhide on a frame where they stretch it. I'm like, oh, that didn't really work, And then I was in Korea and walking in the night market, and they had these squids. Okay?
Oh yeah,
the barbecue squids on a stick.
Squids on the stick,
and they're stretched out, right, Nora? I knew you've seen it. So the next day, I came into the class and I said, the squid. And they all got it.
They all got it.
All knew the squid.
Yeah,
on the
squid on a stick.
But that didn't work in other countries so much. I tried to describe it. It didn't work as an image. But I've come up with a new one, and I thank you to my friend Christina in Italy. Is flying squirrel. It's actually more appropriate. Because it's not attached. The squid, right, is on a stick. Right. So that's really not a tensegrity model because it's a stick.
No,
right?
But a flying squirrel absolutely
But a flying squirrel is biotensegrity. So when I can create movement where I get my flying squirrel going, and breathe and do like translations or rotation, I get some movement. I get, and then I've been working with my neck with that too. And it's a game changer, to be honest with you, for me. Anyway.
So I want to, there was so much in that I just wanted to kind of step back and start pulling things out a little bit, especially for, any of you who are excited about this in the audience, and educators in the audience, or working with people with issues. So one of them is, the first thing is, I wanted to just bring up, when you see the structures in real life, when you see a dissected structure and you see how the fascia is moving and how it's connected, there is a way in which, and this is certainly, a lot of how I've learned stuff and how you and Brian learned stuff, is when that image is in your mind, and when you can start to take that like anatomical imagery and feel it and embody it, that's just something that I find incredibly, incredibly valuable. And so I want to just bring that little piece up, because that's something that you've done a lot of. You've done a lot of dissection, and
that's where the cadavers are great.
Imagery.
Yeah, because it's different than clay. I know people learn anatomy through, but when you're actually in the lab, and Gil Headley's just brilliant teacher about it, and there's a lot of manual therapists who come to his lab. So there's a lot of time spent feeling with your hands. You're actually, palpating and touching, but the structures are right there. You're like really seeing it, and then you're really feeling it. So it's like the imprint of your hands changes. So then when you touch a human being that's alive, right?
Yeah.
You can touch it. It's different, but it's the clarity is just, it's incredible to have that kind of clarity. It does change. Yeah. Yeah. I tell all the teachers that I work with that on their bucket list, they have to get in the lab at least once.
Yeah, I did too. And the other thing too is like taking this back to your like assessment and gait and the thoracolumbar fascia, and that, like, one of the things that I think this conversation just keeps bringing up for me is how interconnected all these pieces are. Your foot hits the ground, and that, however it hits, that transfers up through the legs, through the pelvis, through the thoracolumbar fascia, in whatever way that it does, out through the arms, and vice versa, right? And there's also that elastic recoil piece, if you will, of that wind up and that release, and however you want to time that, that brings that in. And then I love what you were just talking about the importance of glide, and not just from a Pilates perspective, not just flexion and extension, because we do a lot of flexion and extension, but I really find a lot of times the stickiness is not so much in flexion and extension. It's in rotation, it's in lateral flexion, it's in those other more compound moves of the spine and of the thoracolumbar fascia. Things get sticky.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating also when you think about how the body is supposed to work. We all, I don't know, I'm sure you do it because Nora and I do this all the time. We watch bodies constantly. It's just something that we do, and I was in a room with a whole lot of people last week, and I was watching one person walk and just watching them walk across the room. And I knew someone who was a friend of theirs. And I said, what's going on with their back? She said, how can you tell? I said, the way she was walking, she wasn't fully striding. She had no rotation. She wasn't getting into hip extension. Her feet were almost flat to the floor. She wasn't rolling through her arches. All of these things. And yet, I'm sure to you, it's probably like it is to me. I almost had to say them out loud. I was watching them all, but my brain was processing them so quickly that I was just immediately going to what could I be seeing rather than breaking down each part. And I think that part of that is practice. We need to do that. And I was curious if you break that down in your book, how that assessment works and how you really can take that assessment and say, okay, what do I see? What might it mean? What might I need to do with this person to get them to where I need them to be?
Yeah, I think I'm really happy with the second edition, because the first edition came out in 2015. I really didn't know what I was doing. I mean, it's like, I basically took all my manuals, for all the Pilates on tours that I taught, and, and I just kind of collated them and, organized it somehow, but it was, and I didn't want it to be like, I couldn't put too much in there because it'd be like over people's heads or whatever. So, and then COVID.
And the name of this book,
it's Centered,
Ce-
ED. Yeah.
Centered. Okay. And this could be bought on
I don't know.
Amazon or.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Handspring.
Okay.
Or yeah. I like the subtitle better because it's really what the book is about, which is organizing the body through kinesiology, movement theory, and Pilates techniques. And I purposely said Pilates techniques because they're the techniques of using the apparatus, like I said, as another set of hands for some of the things. And that's what I'm just going to say is I teach now in my 5-day intensives. It's all from that, book. But I was going to say, so COVID really, it was a horrible time, right? But it actually was a blessing for me because I was just beginning the second edition. And then I had to organize the trainings, and I had a brilliant tech person coach. The guy was amazing. And we put together my series. We just called it series 1, 2, 3. And so it was a whole big thing we did. And because of that, I got organized in a completely different way. And it helped me actually format the book, which was basically, I started with the feet. Okay. So we start with the feet, but then I give assessment, so each chapter has, an assessment. I give examples of possible findings. And you'll also find that in the Pilates Applications for Health Conditions book, because we did the same thing. These are the findings, the possible ones, so that if you're a teacher and you're like, okay, I'm looking at, a hip sway. Wow. What am I supposed to be looking at? Well, here are some possibilities. You might see this, you might see this, you might. So it's a guide that way. And at the end so the first part is feet, hips and pelvis, right? So, just kind of a basic section 1. And then at the end, there's all of the assessments, all of the release, techniques, activation, the isometrics that I mentioned, and then the loading exercise. So everything is kind of correlated at the end of each section so that the teacher can go and practice and study. And there's videos. Pilates Anytime was very generous in filming. So it's free when you have the book. If you're not a member, it's still free for you. The videos are with the book. So, but yeah, that's what. So in the when you have a hunch, like Brian, like you're saying, you're watching people, move, and you go, but sometimes I look and I say, oh, first thing you say is like that right hip. Wow. Then you look
what
up.
Sticks out.
But then it's like, but is it really the hip? Is that primary?
Right.
How do you know what's primary? That's where the assessment comes in. And then you have to do, see which one is the driver of that pattern. And then I get local, you see, then you zoom in. And if it is the glide of the hip, that's the main driver. Then I show techniques on how to restore that, get it organized again, get the person to activate it and to strengthen it. And then you'll see how it changes the rest of the gait. Or a lot of times what happens is all of a sudden you look up and you're like, wow, that thorax, holy moly.
Right.
Like you don't say that out loud, right? You don't say that.
Oh my God.
You are so messed up.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, never a good idea.
You just smile really big. Right?
Let's take a look at your thorax.
Yes. Now let's go here. Yeah.
It's interesting that you break that down like that, though. And I love the fact that you say you don't know what's primary and you have to really sort of seek that out. Because I think a lot of people go for the low hanging fruit. They see, oh, it's the hip.
Right.
Could it be the hip? Absolutely. But that could be a secondary or tertiary or somewhere down the chain. So to look and really say, what was my primary? What is the driving force is so important. And I love that you go through that with your assessment. That's really important. Yeah.
I had an interesting experience just the other day on Zoom, but because I don't see anybody live here unless they want to come to Baja. So, which I'm sure people would.
Might be worth it right now.
Yeah.
But there's a woman with scoliosis, and I don't know, my first hit, like it wasn't like I did an assessment. It just like was a hit. And I was like, her kidney and the pancreas, like I just, cause I had that like burned in from the cadaver work. And I thought, but I couldn't go there. I'm like, okay, let's, anyway, and then of course I'm doing the questions. I don't know this person, you know, have you ever had surgery? You know, no. You know, so we'd go on, you know, and then but it was really bothering me, especially the kidney, whatever. And it turns out that she had a surgery, you know, on her pancreas.
Oh.
And I was like, because it was her diaphragm, you know, that area was so torqued. And I just felt like, you know, that's right where the pancreas is, right on the spine, just right across there. And also her kidney. I mean, they're so married together. They're like right next to one another, you know. So I just, you know, so is that her primary organization, that her scoliosis? You know, I don't know really. We don't know these things. You know, I could say sure, and you believe me, but I don't really know that's true. But I just found it fascinating.
Egg, right? You don't know chicken or egg, but you know there's a connection.
Yeah, there's definitely a connection for sure.
Yeah,
you know,
and it all, and for you, it also came down to intuition.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you're just looking at someone, and that is something that either I always say either you have it or you don't, or it's something that hopefully with experience and with time you can develop a stronger sense of it.
Totally think you can develop your intuition. I don't think it's a natural gift. I mean, there's some people that it's very easy and it happens quickly, for sure.
Right. Exactly.
I had to really work on it. So it wasn't easy for me at the beginning, you know. And I know that when people in my classes, they're always like, I can't believe what you're seeing. Like, I can't see that. How do you see that?
Right.
You know, and then that's, I think, what I'm really good at doing is really showing them the way how to see it and how to feel it, you know.
Right.
And that's why I need 5 days. This is why, you know, I you know, the days of the conferences and things, you know, they're kind of gone by the way, which is maybe a good thing. I don't know. But for me to do now 1 or 2 days, even 3 days, I mean, I'm kind of
like, you're scratching the surface, right?
Yeah. So that's why I started doing these 5 days. It's a big commitment, but it's a big commitment for me too. So anyway, but it's interesting. But you can train that, I think. And
no, absolutely. I've had staff members, and you're right. Some people take to this very easily, and they just start seeing things very quickly. And other people, it takes time, and through experience and through seeing more and more and more bodies, which is why I say, look, the more people you can see, the better, because you need to develop your eye. And you can't do it with 5 people or the same 5 people you've seen for the last 10 years. You need to see a lot of people and a lot of different situations, and you can develop that. And then you can begin to trust your intuition a little bit more as you develop it and it deepens within you.
Yeah. I also think it's great for teachers to take courses in other fields outside of movement professionals, because in the coursework, you've got all these fit people who are moving. Hopefully everybody's got issues. So I can't say that you're going to have 20 people in your class and they're all great movers, because we all have issues.
Instructors, and it's like you're not going to see the really obvious stuff mostly.
Yeah, but when you're in a room of body workers, manual therapists, and you're studying a manual therapy thing or something, or even a fascia workshop or something, it's completely different bodies. And it's so, I find it so interesting. It's just, I feel like a detective, you know. Okay, what are we going to find? Where's the clue, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Body detectives.
Yeah.
So you use gait as a primary assessment tool, and again, it sounds like you look up and down the chain, right? What's happening with their thorax? What's happening with their shoulders? What's happening with their hips, their feet, their knees, their hips, etc. And then from there, like, that gives you, maybe you find a driver, you know, maybe there's a giant bunion on their right foot, which means that their foot's doing something funny and that feeds up, or maybe they have a hip replacement, or, you know, to your point with this gal, maybe she had surgery on her pancreas. So, so you dig through that. And then when you get through that, you've talked a little bit about mobility. What other ways do you work with fascia? What other ways do you work with those patterns that you see? Big question. So it
is a big question. I'm like,
well,
kind of.
But you said you do a lot of,
right?
You also said you do a lot of things on Zoom. So if your hands aren't on a person, what can you do from a distance? I see about 30% of my people through Zoom now. So there is some limitation to that. Whereas like Nora said, we all have our body working experience, so we can do it in person. But when you're not, so what tools do you use for that?
Yeah,
That you
so
can really get them to?
I just came up with an example. I mean, it's I use whatever's in the room. So if
Mhm.
a lot of the Zooms, I'm actually helping a lot of teachers. So many times
Yes.
they're in a Pilates studio.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that is great. It's like, and then they're so good because they know Zoom, how to move their camera around and set it
Right.
up. They'll say,
Uh-huh.
okay, we're now going to go on the Cadillac, and
I
I'm going to
know.
need for you to have this, 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 and this. And they know what I'm talking about. It's not a
Nice.
client where, so, and then
Yeah.
they, can move their computer, they get all the props they need, and, and then I tell them how to set it up, and then I guide them through the movement. But for clients who are in their living room and they have, maybe a roller and a yoga block and maybe some weights, I don't know, bands, I don't know, whatever they have. Some people don't have anything, but, I've used a wall, but it's like, for instance, if I've got to get the, one of the assessments, a hip drop is what I call a hip drop, and it's just unleveling the pelvis. So you stand, and you just bend one knee, you keep your foot on the floor. I always say, keep your right foot on the floor and bend your right knee, which then unlevels the pelvis a little bit, right? So then you're looking at the hip glide of the pelvis on both femurs. So we should see that ab and adduction. And then we're also, I'm looking at the how the pelvis is dropping. It should only be about 5 degrees. It's not huge, but it's enough that creates the lateral flexion of the lumbar. And then what's the response of the thorax with that?
Yeah.
What is it doing? Is it moving to the right? Is it moving to the left? Is it rotating? How's that responding to all of that? And then of course you can look at the foot. Is the ankle dorsiflexing? How is that? So you have all that information on one simple little movement. But if there's a restriction in that plane, then usually what you'll see is the pelvis will rotate instead of going lateral, right? So instead of getting that side drop, the pelvis will go anterior or posterior, depends. It could be either. The person could be doing that, and then you have to check, why is that happening? Is it the thorax? Because the thorax is translating in the wrong direction? Is it because the ankle's not dorsiflexing, or is it that the left hip is not internally rotating and adducting? I mean, is it that?
Yeah.
I mean, so that, but it's almost like, if I can just notice, like, okay, so the right side is not going down. Okay, but why? This, or that, what I just explained. But let's just do the movement, right? So when I talked about MET, it's like contract release. So I would have them lie on the floor with their they'd be on their left side. So I don't know if you can visualize that, lying on your left side. And the left knee is bent and the right leg is straight and your foot's against the wall. So you have your whole foot on the wall. And I usually have them lie on a little bit of either a bolster, a small pad or something, so they don't collapse into the floor so much. And then depending on the shoulder, I might have the left arm that's on the floor stretched by their ear, but sometimes they can't do that, the shoulder. And so it's okay if it's just tucked under, a support for the head. And then the right hand would be overhead. And depending on where they are, they could grab a table, the couch leg. If you have a Cadillac, we're doing it on the Cadillac, and you have a push-through bar to hold on to, something like that. But you would then push your foot into the wall, right? So we're creating that isometric contraction. They keep the legs straight, and then so the MET usually works at about 5 seconds. You have to hold for 5 seconds. And then you stop pushing, and then you do a heel raise with the legs straight. So that gives you a hip hike on that side, right? Because you're lifting your heel away from the wall. And then you hold it for a couple seconds, 5 seconds, and then you stop, and then you push your foot into the wall again. So you're creating that glide with the leg. I'm moving my shoulder to show you, but you create the glide of that hemipelvis, that half of the pelvis. You're gliding it up, you're gliding it down through the pressure of your foot on the wall and the dorsiflexion, plantar flexion on the wall. And then I've created an environment for their thorax to be in the translated position that should be when they do the hip drop. So they can repeat this movement over and over again. So that's a way to kind of reorganize. Now, a lot of times they'll stand up and they look great, but the other side now is like, whoo, okay, we got to do the other side. The other side needs some help too. Or sometimes they come up and like they're really balanced between right and left side. And so that's all we need to do. And then we move on. So that's kind of what I've had to do with Zoom. You know, I'd much rather have hands on them, but kind of creating that. Yeah. So, and then they get up. Yeah. And then you retest the hip drop and then you're like, okay, good. We're good to go. Let's do rollback.
So what I want to kind of like illuminate based on that example, right, is so much of what we do, and this is again looking at correctives, looking at improving things, looking at changing movement patterns and other things, is assessing, understanding where the limitation is. And you've talked through that. I just want to sort of highlight the process you just went through, right?
Great,
and then recognize, how are you trying to move that? How are you trying to create the movement that maybe isn't there or isn't organized in a certain way? And then using the environment that you have. All right. So in this case, it's using the wall, it's using some pillows, it's using some pads, whatever you need. In the Pilates studio, it might be using the push-through bar. Other environments might be in Brian's environment, which is a personal training environment. You've got other tools. And one of the things that I always like to say to our audience, especially those who are really interested in this kind of work, is this is the thought process. Figure out what's going on, or at least have a hypothesis. Look at what the movement is you're trying to get. Figure out how to get that movement as clearly as possible and as beneficial a way as possible if you are optimized. Repeat it and then load it. Like, I think that's a really just a very clear way of putting things together. Not easy, right? You've been teaching for 40 years. I've been teaching for 37 years. Brian's like approaching that. It takes a long time to develop that, but that's the thought process. That's the clinical reasoning process that you go through when you're really trying to change a movement pattern. That was beautifully said and beautifully exampled. So I just wanted to bring that out.
No, I love that example, because that's what we all have to do. You use what you have. And if you don't have your hands, what can you use? So it's wonderful to hear, you just figure out, what do they have? What can you use? So I love that. Yeah,
I could thank COVID for all that, really.
Exactly. Exactly.
Everybody's verbal cueing got a whole lot better too, I have to say. So that's all they had, because nobody could like stare at the computer or whatever they had and do their movement. Right. So they're all like having to do it auditorially. Well, thank you, Madeline. That was a deep dive into a lot of really interesting stuff. I really loved that whole conversation. And I know that our audience is going to be like, oh, what about this? Like, there's so many things in there.
Oh yeah, I was just saying, we could go out for another couple of hours.
Welcome to my world. Welcome to my crazy world.
I love it. Yeah. That's fantastic.
You can see where Elizabeth, I'll just say a little fun story is, we met regularly for 7 years. So she and I have become very close now.
Yes.
But I'll tell you, sometimes we get on our call and we're supposed to be editing this chapter, and the two of us, you can imagine the two of us together.
Yes, I can imagine.
And 2 hours will go by and I'm like, Elizabeth, we didn't even talk about the chapter. We were so into our thing that it was a pleasure. I mean, it was really delightful. So I'm grateful to have people like that in my life, including you, Nora, since I've known you for so long. And I also want to say thank you for all these years of Pilates on Tour and all of that. Support you've given me all these years. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
These colleagues, this is how we grow together, right? Is these conversations. I mean, I've had so many conversations with you over dinner and conversations with Brian with his podcast. And it's like, and what I love is every conversation that like a little seed gets planted. That's a new seed for me. I'm great. Like, I love the new seeds. Clearly you do too, or you wouldn't have taken every course possible, right? Like, the new seeds are what really feed you. Right. And it's having colleagues like you and colleagues like, many, many members of our industry that really feed us. And that's just the super fun part.
It is. Yeah. Thanks.
Before we go,
I was just going to say thank you, Brian, too. It was nice to talk to you. So
absolutely. You're someone who I've always wanted to, and our paths just never quite crossed. So I'm thrilled that we got to spend this time together. I do want to give you an opportunity, though, to let us know about your books, where we can get them. Do you have anything coming up that you want to promote? Instagram, whatever you want to do. And we can also put these in the show notes so that people can just click on it.
But the easiest thing would just go to my website, madelineblack.com. You know,
Perfect.
the book's there. My event page is there. My upcoming 5-day is in Italy, in Piacenza. So
Nice.
we have room right now, but they're selling out. So it's pretty great. But we have room in that. So that's in April. Come to Italy.
Fantastic. Yes,
Wow.
send us all of your stuff, and we'll put that in your show notes.
Yeah, and it's
for
Madeline
sure.
Black Pilates, you know, on Instagram. I post not so regularly, you know, but and I just started a Substack. I do want to say that I've been writing. So I'm writing these articles, and I'm trying to get one out every week, though I missed last week, but I'm about to publish another one. So, and I believe I changed the name because I was not using the word Pilates, but Madeline Black Moves. So
Nice.
for Substack, if you want to
Excellent.
read some of the articles I'm writing, it would be fun. It's really been fun. Yeah. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks
We
for the
really, really
invitation.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Our pleasure. Believe me, our pleasure. And thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate it. As always, do hit that like and subscribe button. We really appreciate that. Share. This is an episode that I'm sure you're going to want to share with any of your movement professional buddies. Trust me, there's a lot here. I'm going to probably have to listen to this a couple times to sort of get everything out of it. So no, this was fascinating. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions or comments, reach out to us, movingconvos@gmail.com. That's the easiest way to get in touch with us. So for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We'll see y'all next time.
Thanks, guys.